Hello and welcome to another episode of Mercurial Gems. I'm Vi.
I'm Jen.
And today we're going to get into Chiron.
What is Chiron?
Chiron is a mini planet in our solar system, and it's actually so tiny of a planet that it's subcategorized as something called a centaur. Chiron as a planet was discovered in 1977, so some of you listening may even be older than Chiron. And Chiron is the wounded healer. So in Greek mythology, the story of Chiron goes that he was an immortal centaur. He was a healer. He helped heal people, and there was a war at some point that he fought in. And during this war, he got a poison arrow in his ankle. So although he could heal the arrow wound, that pain from the poison just never quite went away. And it was so painful and so agonizing that he ended up talking to Zeus, or Jupiter, if you're in the Roman theology. It basically just said, I don't want to have this immortal life where this wound is constantly causing me pain. So Zeus allowed him to give up his immortality and instead placed him in the sky in the Sagittarius constellation as a star. And that, my friends, is the mythology of Chiron. Now, how does that translate to our birth charts?
Yeah, so we are doing this episode because we wanted to talk about Chiron in context to your personal astrology. So if you pull up your birth chart, you'll see something that kind of looks sort of like a key, and it's typically ran in most of the charts. We give it tons of significance when we do chart reading. It's very fascinating to not only look at what sign your Chiron is in, what house it lands in, but if there's also any aspects from Chiron to other planets, they are going to have a little piece of the Chiron energy affecting them. And I think the most important thing about Chiron, when you learn astrology, you understand this aspect a little bit better, is that Chiron is the wounded healer in your chart. But it's important to know that that wound doesn't necessarily go away. You learn to alchemize its energy, and you learn to not let it have dominant power. It is always this little nag that you are going to feel, because that is ultimately the energy of Chiron. I see it karmatically as sort of a piece of our chart that helps keep us humble. It allows us to have to look at something or maybe lean into a person or a thing that we wouldn't normally do without that uncomfortableness. We both have very personally involved Chirons in our birth charts because we both have Chiron conjunct our natal moons, which means that every time we experience emotions, it is colored with Chiron. So we talk about Chiron all the time because we've had to really learn how to meet that energy in a way that's not all consuming, and to also understand how to pull higher wisdom from it, which is ultimately what we're always doing with our astrology and what you should be doing with your birth chart. But yeah, Chiron is important because I think it's a sensation, a fear, an insecurity that you're going to have to learn how to just move through life with.
Yeah, and to tack on just one more little point that Jen was talking about is we do have to, as we move through our life, learn how to transmute that energy into higher wisdom. Even when you have done that once and twice and thrice, Chiron, because it's a wound that never goes away, will always find a new angle to approach the same wound with you. And it's not doing that to bully you. I know it can feel like it sometimes, but it's not doing it to be mean. The life is happening for you, not to you. So it's to help you gain another multi-dimensional level of understanding how many different ways you can solve the same issue.
The area Chiron is in for you is you're going to be able to take that higher wisdom once you've learned it from so many different angles and help others with the same level of pain. So it's fascinating to even do family charts. I've seen Chiron passed along in the family. We've studied the orbit of Chiron really significantly and looked at how Chiron has affected the general collective. There are time periods that Chiron has been really heavily aspected that have correlated with pretty big historical happenings.
Yeah, so Chiron, while we're on the orbit, is not like Jupiter or any of our major planets where we can go, for example, Saturn. We know about 27 years after our last return, there he is. He's gonna be here for 2.5 years, and we'll see him in another 27, right? Watching Chiron's first round of its orbital path since discovery, it takes about 50 to 51 years for Chiron to make it all the way around back to the point in your birth chart. Chiron Virgos, what I've learned in the orbital pattern is we actually had the shortest amount of time with Chiron. So if you are a Chiron Virgo, you're actually kind of like a unique subset because it was only maybe like 9 months and then it switched into another sign. Now, on the flip side of that, we've been in Chiron Aries, and I think it retrograded, so it did flip-flop, come back, a little bit, but for at least 6 years now, because my nephew is a Chiron Aries, and he's 6, and Chiron will not exit Aries permanently until 2026, where we will officially have our first Chiron return for Chiron itself since discovery.
Yeah, which is pretty wild. So just like our pain, it's very unpredictable, and we have certain periods of life that will go through a square, like Vi said, an opposition. The square can occur anywhere from age 7 to 14.
23, actually.
From age 7 to 23. So there is a very
chaotic orbit pattern.
Yeah, crazy range. But it's fascinating to look at periods of your life and actually calculate when Chiron was square certain planets for you, because it probably showed those were the time periods where you were shown another layer of that pain. I think it's fascinating in real time because the United States is in its 4th Chiron return.
Since the United States has been established.
Yes, so it's fascinating because we are clearly seeing the ripple effect of very deep-rooted pain, and how we respond to that pain is the higher wisdom, and we will keep trying to see where the United States goes as an energy, because right now it is not easy to watch.
Your first square, like Jen said, happens somewhere between the age of 7 and 23. That's when Chiron's kind of poking at you, and you may not even remember this square, like, honestly, but something happened revolving the Chiron energy in your chart that just kind of made you aware in a way that previously you were not. When you have your Chiron opposition, which doesn't have a really good time frame, to be honest, like that I've seen so far. I'm sure as the years go on, we'll have one, but in this current point in history, we don't have a little gauge of that. But when you hit your opposition, this is when you start to like work with that wounded energy. And some people will not work with it. They'll just build up walls and they'll be like, that's not my problem. People who build up walls are probably projecting their problems onto other people a lot. Those of us who do decide to alchemize and work with our Chiron, you're going to begin to not only start to heal those deeper wounds in yourself, but this really beautiful thing happens that no matter where your Chiron is or like what your higher lesson is, when you start learning the higher wisdom of your Chiron placement, whether it's intentional or unintentional, you begin to show people that same lesson that is like constantly ongoing and feels so hard to you, but you start to inspire and teach people that same lesson in a way that like then it's like a ripple effect, right? Like you're the drop that is staring at your wounds and trying to do work on your wounds, but that one little drop has created this ripple effect around you energetically for the people around you. And I think that's really beautiful. And I think that's what draws me to Chiron, like kind of the most. And then of course you have your second square before your return, which again, it's going to start poking at you, but this time you have so much more awareness and knowledge, especially if you did start actually working with your Chiron and not just building those walls. So then once you get to your Chiron return around 50, the idea is that you're ready to embody this energy, not just know about it, not just see it or work around it, but like truly feel it in like the core essence of you.
Mm-hmm. So let's go over Chiron and all of the different signs and the different houses, and we'll keep it semi-brief, but I will start us off with the signs. So Chiron in Aries, we said, it's been in Aries the longest currently, but Chiron in Aries has to do with the wound around your personal willpower, your sense of independence, and there can be a lot of wounds around what you give your energy to and what you don't. So obviously there's going to be a huge spectrum of stories within this, but you're probably going to have a lot of reflection around your anger, a lot of reflection around when you use that fire and how you use it and using it tactfully. There's going to be lessons around you using your personal independence and what you actually want, going after your desires and how you do that. So there's going to be a whole spectrum along that. And then we have Chiron in Taurus. This is going to be wounds around your material world. There's going to probably be wounds around, and there's going to be wounds around your attachment to certain items, what you attract for yourself. There's going to be a lot of wounds around your personal value, how you actually gain that self-esteem, self-confidence, and trust. Your comforts are always going to be challenged in different ways. What actually feels safe to you is probably going to be looked at, and also your sense of security is also going to be looked at.
Gemini Chiron is going to have wounds around communication, maybe the way people receive what you're saying, or even just how you interpret other people like speaking to you. It's kind of funny because Jen runs a retreat every October, and last year I was able to co-facilitate with her and Kat, and we actually had a Chiron workshop in this October witch retreat, and we had two Gemini Chirons, and they both had a twin that they had really big communication gaps with. They didn't speak to their twin. It was not the best relationship, and that is not normal for Gemini Chiron. It's just wild that it happened twice in the same room. Yeah. There can be wounds around fitting into certain social groups, and just the possibility of you always saying more than you mean to. It almost just like word vomit. Then we go into Chiron Cancer, which is potentially going to have wounds around family, value system in which they've imposed on you, whether you feel like it aligns with you or not. Maybe it doesn't align with you, but you really embody it anyway, and then you feel like you're running into roadblocks all the way. Chiron Cancer is going to potentially have wounds around sensitivity, around your femininity. Maybe growing up, people just thought you were way too sensitive, and as you're growing into your person, that's kind of hardened you. A big ingredient for Chiron and Cancer is going to be learning security in that emotional sensitivity and processing.
Then we talk Chiron and Leo. This is mine, so I've definitely had to work with it a lot. So Chiron Leo is the wound of specialness, of creativity, of using your light. There is a lot of story and pain around not really feeling like people are even seeing you or noticing you. It can be really tricky because the gap can always be there where you feel like no matter how much you expose yourself, no one's really truly witnessing you or seeing you. There can be a lot of wounds around that exposure. There can be wounds about what to create, what not to create. And it can go really hot and cold with Chiron and Leo being ruled by the sun, where you will try everything to be seen and then completely shut down and not want anyone to witness or see you. And it kind of ends up following that full spectrum of attention seeking and what that looks like and what your actual need is underneath that attention, because you ultimately have to cultivate a lot of self-love with Chiron and Leo.
We have Chiron Virgo, and here we have wounds around perfectionism and probably some control issues. A little bit of OCD could be in the mix. Just people really questioning your process, even though your process feels like it's perfect. If you have Chiron Virgo, I would not be surprised if you have OCD. I'm not saying everyone's going to have it, but if you tell me you do and I see it in your chart, I'm going to be like, yeah, that track. I love just kind of people trusting me to take what needs to be done and go do it. Like, don't question me, just let me do it. And I feel like with that Chiron Virgo, the second someone does question you, even if it's just like a really innocent question, like there's a little like moment
of critique
loudly, like it feels like critique even when it's not sometimes.
Yeah.
Just now, a great Chiron moment, like truly. Like I know it's not, that's the higher expression of working with Chiron. Chiron's really come through to me during my Saturn return, so I feel like that's been such a secondary gift. But yeah, Chiron Virgo is arguably not the easiest.
And then we have Chiron in Libra. This is going to be the wound of relationships. There is typically a lot of pain reflected to you by other people. So everyone you find yourself in connection with is going to be very exposing. There can still be wounds around some of the Venetian themes around your art, the way you respond to beauty, even some insecurity around your actual physical look or form can come louder with Chiron and Libra. And then going into Chiron Scorpio, this is the wound of control. So Scorpio typically goes through lots of lessons of power and control play and what that looks like. Chiron Scorpio really struggles with keeping a lot in, a lot of secrets, not really knowing how to properly expose itself because all of it feels vulnerable. Scorpio already has trouble with that, but you add in the layer of Chiron and it gets even louder. So for Scorpio, they have to push into some layers of intimacy because you can typically try to block a lot of it off, even though all you really want is closeness. Every form of energy exchange is going to feel vulnerable, so there's a lot of intimacy lessons that have to be learned. Then we got Chiron in Sagittarius. This is going to be the wound of your belief systems, your personal freedom. I think there can be some typically religion trauma or some cultural norm that got put onto you at a young age. It's breaking into your own belief systems and making sure that what you believe feels aligned and well for you. Chiron in Sagittarius is also going to have the wound around personal freedom and sense of expression, what that looks like. And Sagittarius rules honesty. So there's going to be a lot of lessons on owning that side of yourself, making sure that there is just radical freedom that exists. And it's going to take some time to get there, as all Chirons do. And then we have Chiron in Capricorn, which is going to be the wound that's really centered around responsibility. It's going to look at what you do for actual employment, what you do for career. Often Capricorn puts so much pressure on itself, and Chiron, Capricorn in particular, is going to put a lot of stress and pressure on themselves. So it's learning how to give yourself a fair dose of responsibility, how to step in responsibility in a responsible way and to not burn yourself out or not even try because you don't want to fail, which can exist with Capricorn energy too. Then we have Chiron Aquarius. My mother has this placement. This is the wound around your quirky, weird, eccentric self. There is always going to be this craving to be seen as normal. There's going to be a craving to want to just fit in, but like no matter what you do, you are always on the outskirts, never feeling like you truly belong to a group or anything. So it's the wound of being on the outside and having to learn to own that energy and own that you can be a trailblazer and be very different. That doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. And then finally, we have Chiron in Pisces, which is going to be another big wound around your sensitivity, your emotions. Really, Chiron and Pisces has to learn how to stay present in this 3D reality instead of deeply tuning out and escaping. Pisces always has lessons around escapism, and addiction can even be very strong with Pisces. So it's making sure you find ways to actually ground into the here and now and not get lost in the fantasy land that can feel easier to be a part of, because there can be a real wound in missing out on a lot of what's actually happening. So that's Chiron through the signs. And obviously, every single Chiron sign will be color different. If Chiron is aspecting other planets, there's always going to be a deep blend. We are not going to cover all the aspects, but it's really good food for thought as you're calculating your own chart.
And if you're curious about a deeper dive in your Chiron chart, I am offering Chiron specific readings where we go through what sign, what house, and any aspects that Chiron has in your chart, so you have a full encompassing view of the many nuances that Chiron is bringing into your life.
And we will do a part 2 where we actually talk about Chiron in the different houses. So if you want to check that out, we will also have that posted. And with that, yeah, that's essentially Chiron and some of its energetic undertones. Hopefully you can continue to delve into your own chart. But
so if you're watching this relatively in real time, from August 1st till about the middle of September, we are selling tickets for our October Witch Retreat. You can find all that good information down below. Thank you so much for joining us in this video, and we will see you next time.
bye.